Of course, as we've been tracking this developing story, there are so many statements that have been coming in reacting to that plane crash, not only the investigation, but also messages of condolence to those pilots and to the people who were impacted by this. Air Canada's CEO is now, however, being summoned to Ottawa to explain why, when he offered a recorded message offering his condolences, it was almost exclusively in English, and there was no French in that statement. The CBC's Janice McGregor is on this story for us. She joins us now from our nation's capital. You know, certainly a very sensitive topic, but it's generating a lot of reaction in Ottawa right now. Let's talk a little bit more about this issue.
Yeah, the criticism of Michael Russo coming from the very top. Prime Minister Mark Carney on his way into his National Caucus meeting this morning on Parliament Hill, not mincing words.
I'm very disappointed in, as others are, rightly so, in this unilingual message of the CEO of Air Canada. It doesn't matter the circumstance, but particularly in these circumstances, a lack of judgment, a lack of compassion. As you know, the Committee of Official Languages has summoned the CEO to appear before it. I will follow his comments closely, and comments which I would expect in due course from the Board of Directors.
So a bit of a warning shot there about what he would like to see happen going forward by way of some remedial action here. You heard him mention that motion that passed unanimously at the House of Commons Official Languages Committee yesterday. 10 MPs representing sort of all parties, both sides of the House, unanimous in wanting Air Canada's CEO to come and explain himself. The minister responsible for official languages is Mark Miller. He too, on his way into caucus this morning, weighing in and seeming to agree with this decision to call Air Canada's chief executive to Parliament Hill and be held accountable.
I don't want to make political hay over what remains a tragedy with people still in hospital, but this isn't the first time that he's been told to speak French. And he should know better.
The video that Air Canada posted on social media, as you say, almost entirely in English. It's sort of a hello at the top and a bonjour in French and merci at the end, but otherwise entirely in English. He talked about how he was deeply saddened and this was a dark day. The airline explained the decision to speak only in English by saying that because this was such a sort of sensitive message that he wanted to be clear and be understood, and noting that sort of there were official statements posted in both official languages online. The question is whether this is good enough for an airline that is supposed to be complying with the Official Languages Act, is supposed to be providing fully bilingual services. We have seen some pretty strong reaction, for example, from the Bloc Québécois. Yves-François Blanchet is saying on his social media channels, just to translate and paraphrase a bit, that he believed that this was a sad and gross lack of respect, especially towards the family of the deceased pilot, who of course was a French-speaking Quebecer, also saying that Rousseau, the executive, must seriously ask himself whether he has not clearly disqualified himself for the position he holds. And in speaking sort of along those lines, we're also hearing today from the Quebec Premier with a similar message, talking about how what Air Canada's CEO did shows a lack of respect for Quebecers, that he hasn't learned to speak French is a real problem. Quebec's Justice Minister piling on, the minister responsible for the French language in Quebec also saying an apology would be warranted here. There is an Office of Official Languages in this country. The Commissioner keeps track of complaints about lacks of service and unequal treatment for the two languages in Canada. That office, as of 9 a.m. this morning, says it's received 561 complaints now and counting, complaints that it continues to review to determine their admissibility in sort of the kind of formal procedures that it can institute.
And of course, potentially what might be further aggravating this situation is that it's not the first time that the CEO has been criticized for a lack of ability to communicate in French. It's in fact the second time. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, official languages are a fact in Canadian politics, right? The Carney government has been under a lot of scrutiny. The Prime Minister himself has sort of been criticized for not taking the issue seriously enough, needing to improve his French. He, is accused of not speaking French often enough, for example, in his public speeches. So to call this sensitive in a year where there's an election coming up in the province of Quebec and the Sovereigntist Party is on the rise, that for sure an understatement. But the parliamentary committee that will be summoning the executive called this very same executive 4 years ago in March of 2022 after a speech that he gave to a mostly Anglophone audience in Montreal's Chamber of Commerce, talked mostly in English for 20 minutes and only for a few seconds in French at that point. He promised then that he would do better, that he would learn, that he would work on it. But he also said that he'd worked in Montreal for 14 years and at first seemed to kind of not see the problem. One of the MPs on this committee, Joël Gaudin, a Conservative MP, he was too reacting on his way into the National Caucus meeting this morning.
Unacceptable, because it's repeat the situation.
So unanimity, not one where the sort of parties are disagreeing with each other on this one. We don't know yet when this committee appearance will be, presumably later on this spring, according to the motion. But it seems some really tough questions being lined up for Air Canada's CEO.
Janice, thanks for this. That's the CBC's Janice McGregor reporting from Ottawa.